Yo guys, today I'm playing as Barley, and I'm going to try to clear as many maps as possible. Let's see if I can survive without getting sent back to the lobby immediately. But while I'm doing that, I gotta tell you about something that happened to me once. Bro, I had such a weird experience one day that I spent like a whole week thinking, did this actually happen or was I just exhausted? So, this was during winter. Around 9 p.m., I'm heading home after a long day and I'm absolutely finished. You know those days where you don't even want to talk, think, or exist. I'm standing at a bus stop, not many people around, and I notice this guy. Nothing unusual at first, but he's standing there looking directly at me. Not aggressively, just looking. At first I ignore it. Whatever. People look at people. Maybe he's waiting for the bus, too. Okay, not bad. Barley's actually surviving right now. Anyway, a few minutes pass. Bus pulls up, I get on. And this guy gets on too. Alright. Coincidence. I sit down. And after like 10 seconds, I notice he sits directly across from me. Now that felt a little weird, but I'm telling myself, don't start imagining things. So I keep scrolling on my phone. Then I notice from the corner of my eye, he keeps glancing over. Not constantly, but like he's checking if I'm looking back. And now my brain starts doing what brains do. Do I know this guy? Have I seen him before? Neighbor? Coworker? Old classmate? Nothing. Completely unfamiliar face. Whatever. Bus keeps moving. A couple stops later, this guy suddenly stands up, walks over to me and says, "Sorry, can I ask you something?" Now I'm expecting literally anything. Directions, time, money. But instead he asks, "Are you Ethan?" And I go, "No." He just stands there for like 3 seconds, then says, "That's weird," turns around, and sits back down. That's it. No explanation, nothing, just leaves. And honestly, I relax. I'm like, okay, wrong person, happens, but nope. A minute later, he comes back and says, "Are you sure?" Bro, what do you mean, are you sure? Am I supposed to forget my own name? At this point, I actually start laughing. I tell him, "Yeah, man, pretty sure." He walks away again. And this is where it starts getting strange. For the next 15 minutes, this guy just sits there and occasionally looks at me. Not smiling, not talking, just checking. And now I'm curious. Who is Ethan? Why does this matter? Okay, wow, that was actually a pretty clean play. Barley's kinda underrated sometimes. Anyway, I'm almost home. I stand up to leave. And this guy stands up too. Now, suddenly it's not funny anymore. I'm thinking, okay, either coincidence or this story is going somewhere I don't like. I get off. He gets off, starts walking behind me. Not fast, just walking. And now I'm thinking, alright, I need to figure this out. So I stop, turn around, and ask, "Hey, what's going on?" And then he says something that completely caught me off guard. He looks at me and says, "Look, if you're not Ethan, this is going to be really awkward." Then he pulls out his phone, shows me a picture, and my brain genuinely stopped for a second. Because on the screen was a guy, and this guy looked a lot like me, not movie level. Oh yeah, I kind of see it. No, like uncomfortably similar. Same hairstyle, same age, even the jacket looked close. I stare at the picture for a few seconds and go, okay, that's actually weird. And suddenly this guy lights up and goes, "See, that's what I said." And then he starts explaining. So apparently Ethan is his younger brother. And here's where the story changes. Because his brother wasn't missing in some dramatic mystery way, he just left. Stopped answering people, moved somewhere, changed his number, barely talked to family anymore. And this guy had apparently spent weeks randomly thinking he saw him everywhere. Now immediately I felt kind of bad, because 5 minutes ago I thought this dude was acting strange, but now it just sounded sad. So I tell him, man, that's definitely not me. He looks at me, looks at the picture, looks back, then says, yeah, I know. But he still looked disappointed. And honestly, that part felt worse than the weird staring. Now at this point, I'm expecting the conversation to end. But no. Because then he suddenly says, can I ask one favor? And I'm like, sure. And he goes, can you say something? Now I'm confused. I ask, what? And he opens a text conversation and says, just say, dude, relax. Bro, what? But alright, at this point, I'm already committed. So I go, dude, relax. And this man freezes, like completely, stares at me for 4 seconds, then suddenly laughs and goes, okay, yeah, voice is completely different. Thank you. Glad we solved that. Although honestly, this entire interaction already felt like the weirdest identity verification process ever. Okay, hold on, that throw was actually kinda nice. Barley sometimes feels illegal when people walk straight into bottles. Anyway, now the guy starts apologizing and says, sorry if I scared you. Then he explains something. Apparently his brother used to pull stupid jokes all the time. Disappear for days, change numbers, pretend not to know people in public, stuff like that. And the last thing he apparently told him before disappearing was, if I ever want to disappear, you'll never find me. And after that, he basically vanished. Now suddenly the story stopped feeling funny, because before it sounded ridiculous. But then you realize, this guy wasn't following me, he was hoping, and that honestly felt worse. So I ask, did you guys try finding him? And he says, yeah, then shrugs and goes, at this point, I mostly just hope I randomly run into him. And I don't know why, but that sentence kind of stayed with me. Because imagine seeing strangers and thinking, maybe this time, maybe this one. So we stand there talking for another 5 minutes. At this point, everything feels normal. We're joking, talking, he's actually pretty funny. Then before leaving, he says, if you ever see somebody that looks like you, tell him I said hi. And I laugh. He laughs. We go separate ways. And honestly, that should have been the end. But 3 days later. 3. I'm going home again. Different bus stop. Different part of town. I get on. Sit down. And then I look up. And immediately sit back up. Because I see the guy from the picture. No joke. At first I think my brain is making connections. So I look again. And I swear, it looked exactly like him. And suddenly I'm sitting there thinking, okay, if this is actually him, what am I even supposed to do? Go up and say, hey, your brother thinks you disappeared? That sounds insane. But then the worst part happens. He looks at me, stops, starts smiling. And I immediately think, alright, either this is about to become the weirdest coincidence of my life, or I'm accidentally entering somebody else's family storyline. Then he stands up, walks over, looks at me, and says, bro, don't tell me you confused me with somebody too. And I immediately just stared at him, because what do you even say to that? This dude walks up to me and somehow says exactly the kind of sentence I was afraid of hearing. So I laugh awkwardly and go, oh, okay, wait. Then I ask, random question. Is your name Ethan? He looks at me for 2 seconds, then starts laughing. Like, genuinely laughing, and goes, no, but you're not the first person to ask. Now I'm confused. I go, what does that mean? And he shrugs and says, apparently I just have one of those faces. And then he starts listing stories. People confused him with an old classmate, a delivery guy, someone's cousin, some random TikTok creator. And one time an old lady hugged him because she thought he was her grandson. At this point, I'm already thinking, okay, maybe this is just one giant coincidence. But I still ask, "Do you have a brother?" He goes, "Yeah." Now immediately my brain goes, "Oh no." So I ask, "You guys talk?" And he says, "Yeah, pretty regularly." Okay, not Ethan. Probably. Then I ask, "You didn't randomly disappear recently or anything?" And he looks at me and goes, "Should I be concerned?" Fair question, honestly. So now I realize, wrong guy, just unbelievably similar. And honestly, I was ready to leave it there. But then I thought, man, what if? So I pull out my phone, open the picture, show him the older brother, and ask, "Okay, this is gonna sound weird, but do you know this guy?" He looks, stops smiling, looks again, zooms in and goes, "I don't know him." Pause, then says, "But he kinda looks like my neighbor." Bro, what? At this point, I start laughing because somehow every person in this story apparently has another person they look like. And now this guy starts telling me stories. Apparently his neighbor once got into the wrong car, called somebody else's dog, and accidentally accepted someone's food delivery. This entire conversation had completely lost the plot. Okay, wow. Barley actually carried that. Not bad. Anyway, we're talking, laughing, and then he suddenly asks, "Wait, do you have the picture of the brother?" So I show him. He stares for a second, then says, "Hold on," opens his phone, scrolls, turns the screen, and says, "Is this him?" And I froze, because it was him. Same guy, same face. I go, "Wait, you know him?" And he says, "No." Pause. "But I saw him last week at a coffee shop." And suddenly everything clicked. Not missing, not mystery, not secret, just gone. Apparently the guy was talking with someone about moving to another city, and honestly that hit me harder than I expected. Because suddenly the story changed. Maybe he didn't disappear. Maybe he just left quietly. So later that day, I texted the older brother. Yeah, we exchanged numbers back then. I just wrote, "Hey, I think somebody saw him." No details, no pressure. An hour later, he replied. One message, just, "Thank you." That's it. Never heard from him again. And honestly, I still think about that sometimes. Because sometimes people don't disappear. Sometimes they just leave. And everyone else keeps searching for a mystery that isn't there. Anyway, moral of the story, if somebody ever asks, "Are you Ethan?" Answer carefully. You never know. Bro, I was fighting for my life on these maps and telling this story at the same time. So, if you enjoyed this chaos, leave a like and subscribe. And tell me, what's the weirdest coincidence that's ever happened to you?